So after sharing the intensity of the practice this morning, this week, and these weeks with some of you, we wanted to give you encouragement to keep practicing. Because Ashtanga Yoga, if you haven't already figured it out, is, guess what? Hard. It's difficult, and it only increases in difficulty. It does not decrease in difficulty, So we know that it's difficult to maintain the practice. It's difficult even to come to class sometimes. Oh, bed is comfortable, And then we look for motivation, inspiration, and we understand that to take the commitment of the practice on is like building a long-term relationship. It's a commitment to carve out valuable hours of your day, valuable hours and weeks and months of your life to give in service of the practice. And it is also a very intense relationship, Ashtanga Yoga is also in some ways jealous, right? If you start doing other things, how does it respond? Not so well, oh, I love this other activity. Let me do, for example, skiing. I've never been skiing. I'm from here. I'm from Florida. If you haven't noticed, there are 0 mountains. There's never snow on the ground in Florida. If there ever is, it's the end of the world. And we have bigger problems than skiing. But I've never been skiing. I have been on many mountains and observed skiers. And I've heard many stories of students that have done skiing with a very negative impact on their practice, right? And so if you suddenly take up other hobbies, Ashtanga Yoga can become jealous and then come and sort of become angry with you when you get back on the mat. So it's a very demanding practice that asks a lot of you, so much so that it's not easy when you get on the mat. It's not easy to sort of merge the Ashtanga Yoga practice with the everyday occurrences of our life. And it draws people who like that intensity. And unfortunately, the people who like that intensity, we often treat our practice like all or nothing. I'm either going to go all in or it's not, or I'm going to quit. And because of that intensity, what we've noticed is that sometimes people who, maybe for whatever reason, cannot do the complete practice as they've learned it, maybe because of an injury, maybe because of a health issue, a physical health issue, a mental health issue, or because of life circumstance. Maybe we're caring for, an aging parent or a young child. Suddenly they feel Ashtanga guilt. Oh, I'm not been able to practice properly. And then they easily throw it out the window, or they become angry at what they think are the hard edges of the discipline. And that very same thing which served such a wonderful, place of inspiration and a wonderful place of sort of grounding and healing begins to be a place of uncertainty. And we want to allay those fears and concerns, really, and help everyone understand that, first of all, our teachers, always recommended to just do whatever practice you could do. But Tabi Joyce himself always used to say, what constitutes a complete practice is the Surya Namaskar, the sun salutations, and the last 3 asanas, and that's it. So he said, look, if you can't do anything else, at least do that. And then if you can't do that, he said, maybe you can read a book. Right? I heard him say that to someone once who was traveling, making a long travel. I'm taking the student asked him on my first trip to India, Patabi Joyce Guruji, I'm going to take a train to Delhi from Mysore, and they wanted to take an overnight train. And then his first question was, why? Like wanting to take an airplane. So they wanted to take a train. Oh, I want the experience. Oh, and they were very concerned. I will lose my practice. So what shall I do? And he said, oh, no practice, 3 days. Maybe you can read a book. So like that, the idea that the strict edges of the discipline were never really originating from our teachers. And the idea that, yes, the practice is done 6 days a week, but the reason for that is not to create a standard of impossibility that's for our best interest. Yes, the practice has particular guardrails around not doing all the asanas at once, but again, that's for our best interest. It's almost like all of the rules that are there were designed not to be these absolutist terms that can box us in, but actually to support us in the practice. So one of the reasons why we advise to practice 6 days a week is because once something is ingrained into the daily routine of who we are, it actually requires less energy to actually do the practice. But if each time we need to do the practice, we need to think, shall I do it? Shall I not do it? I'm not sure. What time shall I do it? Shall it be early or shall it be late? Shall I practice in the morning or maybe in the evening? And then if I practice, then why is the series set? Again, not to create a rigidity to make all different bodies fit into one box, but to also remove the question of, what shall I practice? Shall I do back bends? Or shall I do forward bends? Or maybe I should do some strength and work on handstands. No, I don't like those. Maybe I'll do yin. Oh, it's boring. Maybe I should do hiking. That seems better, right? So like that, if we're constantly asking, what shall I do? What shall I do? Then we end up not doing. So the Ashtanga Yoga method, the form of the discipline, is again not there as a punishment, but actually there to support us. So all of the things that we often take as absolutists sometimes can be softened a little bit. And in that softening can give us the longevity of our practice, which is, look, if we can't practice 6 days a week, practice as much as you can. This is like if you went to your dentist and you said, look, I'm overwhelmed with brushing my teeth twice a day. Then your dentist would say, well, I really think you should try to motivate yourself. For example, let me show you a picture of a cavity. Let you hear the sound of a root canal. Will that motivate you? And then you think, hopefully, yes, By now, at some moment, I don't know maybe when toothbrushing first got invented, you only had to brush once a day, right? And then it became twice a day, and then they invented dental floss, and then now there's water flosses, and all sorts of other dental cleaning devices that you can use. And in that way, your dentist would encourage you to use them all. So we're Ashtanga Yoga teachers. So we're like, practice 6 days a week, do everything you can because we know the benefit of the practice. And that's why we want to encourage you to do the practice. Not that you're bad if you don't. Not that if you need to take even a long hiatus, if you, for example, have to stop the practice for years of your life for one reason or another, maybe health issues, maybe life circumstance, one reason or another. If you come back, we don't need to come back with guilt, shame, or blame. We just pick it up from wherever we are and we start again. And in that way, we want to give everyone the inspiration to keep practicing. Both of us have been practicing for a very long time. I've been practicing for more than 20 years, Tim longer than that. And the idea of having a relationship with the practice, we understand that the relationship we make with our practice is intense, it is demanding, and it is like a relationship, which means that it's something to be built and cultivated over time. Building and cultivating a relationship over time means that you will also go through ups and downs, right? Meaning sometimes practice feels wonderful. Oh, I love my practice. Yay, fantastic. Getting a lot of attention from your teacher. Everything's going really well. Getting new poses. Things are working. Then suddenly what happens? No attention from your teacher. A lot of body pain. Then you're giving back poses that you could once do. Oh, I used to do this, but I can't do it anymore. Please help, And then we feel bad. Oh, In that moment, the practice actually begins because we move away from just the physical elements of the practice to the internal work of what it brings up. See, our teachers always talked about that there were subtle things happening constantly in the flow of prana within ourselves that we're not aware of. But through the vehicle of the practice, that energy is shifting within us and working in ways that we are not always cognizant of. So in many ways, we need to give it time. When we want to quit the practice and we're experiencing the presence of one of the obstacles as stated in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is doubt, when we start to doubt the practice, right, then we understand that we are working with an ancient obstacle. In the face of doubt, Pattabhi Jois used to quote one particular Yoga Sutra, which I'll share with you now, which was Satu Dirga Kala, Nairantardya, Sarkara Sevito Dridabhumi. In Sanskrit, this is the Yoga Sutra Pattabhi Jois used to quote often. He said that if we want to take Dridabhumihi, firm ground of the practice, then we need to do a couple of things. First, we should practice for Dirga Kala, which is what? A long time. What is long time for you? What do you think? Some people from the United States are like 3 months, 3 months, if it's not working, I'm gonna cut this right off. And in some ways, I'm like, maybe on some level, if you really, if it's really not gonna be for you, maybe quitting sooner is maybe better. But I don't think we can know if something works for us, as deep as yoga works for us, until it can work for a long time. Pattabhi Jois used to say, whole human lifetime. This is a long time, right? We must practice for our whole lifetime. Satu Dirga Kala. Nairantardya, without break. Relentlessly, ceaselessly, perseverantly, diligently, patiently, without break. That doesn't mean that we have to do a handstand every day. That means in some form, yoga is our life without break. Whether we're doing asanas, whether we're not doing asanas, whether we are able to lift up, or whether we're injured and our wrist is in a cast or something like that. And then only we have the idea that the intention, finally, the third element is that our intention, we must be sincere in our desire for the practice. Our sincerity on the path means that we will come with the right reasons, the right intention, or that the right reasons will evolve within us. Right? Many people don't come with the right intentions for the practice, So some people I know that have been practicing for a long time, they came with almost the opposite of yogic intention to the practice. And many people I know said, I came because the instructor was cute. I kid you not. I have a good friend of mine. I'm not making it up. It's not a fiction I'm telling over here. There's actually numerous people I know that have started that way. Some that are practicing many years later. A good friend of ours shared the story. I started yoga because I saw the yoga instructor, and I was very attractive, and she walked into a yoga center, so then I followed her in, and I thought, stalker, and then said, where's this class? Is there a woman who walked in? Oh, she's the teacher of this class. So he said, I'm taking the class. Then he took the class, and he just kept taking the class because he wanted to get her attention, and ultimately asked her out on a date, and they went on a date. And then they had some short-lived relationship, but he was practicing 30 years later. Right? So the right intention evolved from within him, whereas the initial intention, right? So if that comes, also that can be the good intention. So how do we reach the firm ground? Recall this sutra each time we face our doubt, each time we think, oh, Ashtanga Yoga is too demanding, oh, it's too much, oh, I'm injured, I can't lift up properly, oh, I'll never get back bend, oh, I'll never do advanced asanas, or I'll never do advanced asanas again, or we start to doubt our purpose in the practice. We have to come back. Have I done this for a long time? Have I done this without break? How can I recommit myself to the practice? And let me reconnect to the deeper intentions of the practice. And if these three elements are there, then we know we have reached the firm ground, dhruta bhumihi, of the practice. And that firm ground is something that's talked about quite often in the spiritual practices. Because until we attain firm ground, there's another risk of one of the obstacles appearing, which is called anavashtitattvani, which means slipping from ground gained. Translated into English, the English word recidivism, which means backsliding. So we feel good, and then it slips away. We feel good, it slips away. And until we reach dhruta bhumihi, the firm ground, we will always have that feeling of loss and yearning, and that idea that may actually cause us to depart from the practice. It's not that we'll never feel 5 steps forward, 5 steps back again, that feeling of losing the ground gained, but that when it appears as an obstacle, it always runs the risk of snatching the practice away from us and making us, never practice again. We are not here today because it's been easy for us, because we've had a steady upward trajectory through all of the asanas and through all of every moment that yoga has delivered to our life. We are here today because of our teachers who never gave up on us, and because of our community that supported us, because of every student like you who's come and joined our classes, and because we showed up and we were willing to work with the difficulty, the adversity, and accept all of the imperfections of our own bodies and our own lives. It's not that we've never been injured or felt pain. It's not that all the asanas were easy for us, but it's actually because of that struggle that we're still here today.
So Kino's talking about my soul and stuff, and it's like the question is like, why do we practice and what do we get out of it? And I think it's really important for each and every one of us to figure that out. Like if we don't know why we get on the mat, if we don't have like a really deep seed of knowing that, it will slip at some moment. We will stop practicing. So I think us practitioners, we can do ourselves a great favor by really try to contemplate that, reflect on that, figure out why we're there. And usually it comes out with a positive response. I often find, as Kino mentioned earlier also, that it's hard to get on my mat. It's like when I'm on the mat, it's easier to stay, but it's hard to get on my mat. So I know that my first thing is to get on the mat, and then the second thing is to stay on the mat. As long as I can manage those two, then it's going all right. It's like my work ethic is generally all right, but those are the two difficult ones. But that's one of the reasons that I practiced with Sharaji all these years, and before him, Pattabhi Jois, is because not because there's not other yoga masters out there. There's some really, really, truly amazing people. Like I've studied a little bit with Richard Freeman and a little bit with David Swinson, and I met Manju, Pattabhi Jois' son, and some other people that I find are very knowledgeable. Tim Miller also. But the difference between these teachers and Sharaji for me is that Sharaji, he was keeping me accountable very, very strongly. And the ones of you who has met Sharaji, you know, he's quite strict. And I need that. I needed someone, like a father role to be strict with me. And if I hadn't needed that, maybe I would have chosen David Swinson. He's much more fun, So, but that wasn't in it for me. So Kino quoted a Yoga Sutra, and I brought two other sutras along that we could perhaps take a quick look at in that regard. So we call the practice tapas. Tapas as being something that we can do to better ourselves, to make our lives better, to have a more enjoyable journey as a human being in this lifetime. And there's one here that talks about what tapas brings along. And it says, Kaya Indriya Siddhihir Ashudikshate Tapasaha. So what does it mean? Kaya means body, Indriya means senses, and Siddhi here means benefits, things that we get, powers that we get from there. So what the sutra proposes is that there are some special benefits that our body and our senses, perhaps even our body via the senses, is getting from tapas. And that is that it has the possibility to purify us, to bring our body and our senses towards perfection, and by eliminating stuff that is in the way. So what it means is that this whole physical thing, the body, the senses, and including in that is our emotions and is our mental activities and so forth, that tapas has the possibility to get that in a little bit better shape. And I think we all feel that, right? Is anyone that have never felt like you do a practice like today, we come out, we feel better. For instance, when I practice really strongly, I love to eat, because the food, I'm truly hungry. You know what I mean? I get truly hungry. You know the feeling where you're kind of hungry and you need to eat, and it's that time of the day and you should eat something, but you're not really hungry. But when we practice for real, we get hungry. So, and the food is just so delicious. It almost doesn't matter what we get when we are hungry. It's just like those first bites are just so amazing, right? So I think that there is, which is another part of it. There's just a joy. It brings a joy along. It sets us into this physical paradigm of living so strongly, where we can begin to experience ourselves and our physicality, and we could begin to experience all these things in the world in another way. And Indriya means senses, and I feel that when I practice, my senses gets a little bit more clear, a little bit more clean. Like I was talking to Josephine yesterday, and she says she used to drink coffee before practice, but she can't drink coffee anymore, even one sip, and she starts to get, like acid reflux or gastric or whatever it's called, right? And I have the same thing. I cannot drink coffee before practice. Before teaching, okay. Before anything else, okay. But before practice, no. It's not possible, because I start to experience all the negative things of coffee. Yeah, you didn't know, right? But there's negative things of coffee. Yeah. So I start to feel that, like when I started to practice. So I had to eat something a little bit lighter before. And I had an experience some years back. I went to Mysore 1 year and practiced. And I had this incredibly sad experience coming out of it. Like for a full year, I couldn't drink any coffee at all. Whoa, can you imagine that? So all I could taste when I was drinking the coffee was like, I think around my tonsils here, like I could just feel the bitterness of the coffee for full. And I tried more sugar, you know. And we in Miami, you know the Cuban coffee, it's pretty sugary already, right? So, and it didn't work. But then this very lucky thing happened. I went back to Mysore the year after, and I practiced for a month or two with Sharaji and maybe Patabi Joyce at that moment. And when I came back, I could drink coffee again. Yay! I'm not sure what happened, but something happened in that regard. So, as an example, it's like I think we all begin to experience that there's a sensitivity that rises from strong practice. Towards food, towards other people, towards what we want in our life, towards everything in that way. And sometimes even in a problematic sense, we become extra sensitive. So we need to buy organic blueberries because we can taste the difference now. I don't know, things like that, right? So Patanjali promises us that. It's purifying the body towards perfection as it is starting to remove all the dull, thick, heavy covering over our physicality and our senses and our minds and our emotions and so forth. But then there's something also interesting. So when we talk about practice, we talk about the physical practice, but we also talk about the study of yoga itself. So I'm sure all of you go and you do your practice, but you also read a little bit and you listen to some podcasts and you go on OmStars and things like that. So that type of work we would often call a little bit different than tapas. We would call it svadhyaya. It's like study of self, study towards the self. Who am I? What does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be a yogi? And so forth. And in that regard, Patanjali is proposing that when we're doing these studies together with our tapas, together with our practice, we have the possibility to connect to what he calls the Ishta Devata. Devata is like the god or the divinity or something that is truly a higher power. And Ishta refers to that it is like an idiosyncratic thing. That is our Ishta Devata. It's not just any god. It's not any higher power. It's not any power. It is something that is truly powerful to us, to me. So through the study and through the tapas, I have the possibility to begin to find the sensitivity, to find the introspection, to find the seed of knowing that gives me the possibility to understand myself and therefore what is meaningful to me, what is important to me, what is powerful to me, what am I looking for in life. So is it playfulness? Is it sincerity? Is it money? Is it like to be rich and retired? You know, that is not too bad, right? Or what is it that is truly meaningful to me? Is it relationship to other people? Is it more time spent with myself? Is it study? Is it what is important to me in my life? Rather than what I think I should be doing. What my parents, what life, my wife tells me I should be doing. Yeah? What other people tell me. But truly what is important to me. So, and I think that when we start to have an idea about these things, we can truly make life very, very meaningful. We can make this journey really joyful, really meaningful, really substantial. And Patanjali proposes that tapas and svadhyaya has the possibility to take us there. And it can be problematic sometimes because we realize, I don't like my job, don't like what I'm doing, I don't like the people I'm around, I want to do something else. And it can cost a lot. That can be a heavy price to pay for that. But generally, when we allow ourselves to pursue these things, then many positive things come from that also.
There's one last thing I wanted to say. So one other thing that is, I think, relevant for us to reflect on is that, hearing all of the good benefits that come from the practice, Tim, as you just described, one thing that I feel so many people really connect with is that we agree that this is a good practice, and that's part of the reason why we feel so bad if we can't do it. Other things that we just stop doing, we don't really, feel so guilty about. So, for example, if there's a restaurant that you used to go to a lot and you just somehow don't go to that restaurant as much, we don't really feel so guilty about it. Or if you used to eat a lot of broccoli and then you're eating a lot of Brussels sprouts now instead, we're not feeling like we're cheating on broccoli. We're just like, well, now I'm eating some Brussels sprouts instead. It's not really a thing. But in Ashtanga Yoga, something we've noticed is that when people leave, it's kind of a nasty breakup. It's not just like, well, I guess I'll just, go to the gym instead, or I'll go do this other style of yoga. It's sort of like, I gave my blood, sweat, and tears, and now I quit. So it's like a nasty breakup, and very often I think it's because on some level there's this sort of recognition that this was very special and meaningful and useful, and there's some need to kind of process our feelings around turning away from it if we turn away from it. I mean, our hope is that we all keep practicing, and that's why we're speaking of this, and why we want to encourage you to find the framework of the practice that works the best for you. And we also know that despite that, some of us may stop practicing for a period of time, and that it's okay to stop and to start again and to come back. We saw Pattabhi Jois Guruji welcome some old students of his that took like a 20-year break from practice. I mean, think about that, 20 years. And you're thinking, what did they do? Well, they raised kids and had a family, and then they decided, look, they were in a period of time where they felt that they could not support their family with being a yoga teacher. So they got like normal people jobs and worked 9 to 5 to support their family and didn't have time to do their practice. And then when their kids were old enough, they were like, well, let's start this yoga thing again. And they went back to India. And Pattabhi Jois wasn't like, oh, bad. He's like, you raised your family. Good. Come take practice again. And so like that, just welcome them back with open arms. So if you're out there and you're thinking, oh, I've gone away from the practice, or my practice isn't good enough, just come back. And all those benefits that, that we were talking about, all the purification of the senses, all of that, spiritual self-inquiry, those are all still there. And you pick up back from where you left off, and you keep going. So keep that in mind, whether you're going back home, or whether you're out there on the path, or whether you're, in the period where you're just strong and motivated. So we want to give you an opportunity also to ask them questions. So maybe we can turn to any questions also from anybody at home. Feel welcome to type them into the chat. And if you're here, you're welcome to raise your hand and ask a question in person. I'll repeat the question. Since we made the commitment to practice Ashtanga Yoga 6 days a week, what's the longest period of time that we've gone without practicing?
Well, recently.
And how did you feel about it?
Yes, here in May I had to take like 2.5 weeks off because I had a tooth that wouldn't let me lie down or put my head down and stuff like that. So I had a wisdom tooth removed, and it got a little complicated. So that was really not my preference. And also like I had to be up here teaching in June, so I had somehow hoped that May I could hit the practice a little bit stronger, like focus a little bit more on that. Something like that. Long time back, when I was still working in the arts, I would often like go in and out. Like I would do a project that would maybe be 3 months, and during these 3 months I would practice sporadically or shortly. Maybe I would get 10 minutes, of practice. Or I was a little younger, so I could do things different. But I used to be, I would go to meetings from 6, 7, 8 in the morning. Then I would run rehearsal all day. And then I would, it was in Copenhagen, and I would bike to the yoga shala, Ashtanga Yoga shala, Copenhagen. And then I would eat a sandwich on the way, on the bicycle. And then I would go into evening class and do third series. But I can't do that anymore. So that was kind of like, I look back at that going like, how did I make that work? But so that would be like sustained periods of time where I would just not have a very consistent practice. But I would say always doing a little bit. But my whole life I have somewhat thrived on using my body. When I was a kid, I was a swimmer, and then I started to do dancing, and then that bled into this yoga thing. So I think I've always had this, I've always had a little more energy that I should. Like Kina used to call me a Weimaraner. They have like this energy. They need to run 20 miles, and if they don't, they are impossible to be around. So I think I'm a little bit like that. So it's getting a little easier now here after 60 years. But I don't know, was that an answer? Yeah, okay. I feel, but like in my feeling is a little bit, if I only do 10 minutes, I don't feel I've practiced. And I have to remind myself that it's legal to call it practice. It's like, I can't call that practice, but it's like, yeah, but it wasn't really. You know what I mean? I have that feeling, Sometimes it's more like, I feel a little bit guilty or something about it, but how about you? What's the longest time? Like, how long time have you practiced?
I've practiced Ashtanga for 1 year.
1 year? Okay. So the longest time you haven't practiced was 17 years. Okay. So Claudia has been practicing for 1 year, and during this year, at some moments, you took 1 month off. How did that feel? Not good? So Claudia, she said that she felt guilty if she didn't get on the mat. She didn't feel good if she didn't get on the mat. But sometimes she could just do one down dog, and that made the guilt subside a little bit. Something like that?
So one of the things that I actually said when I was giving a talk on my first book about Ashtanga Yoga was, I'm standing here today because I practiced 6 days a week for the last 20 years or something like that. And Tim will tell you, one of the things about me is that the discipline, meaning once I say I'm going to get on my mat and do it, somehow I do it. I don't know. And that's like grace. I was born like that. It's not something that, if anything, I have a hard time not. To the extent that I will deprive myself of sleep and food and whatever is necessary so that I can do that practice. And I think part of the reason is that my mental health improves dramatically when I do the practice. So I'm willing to sacrifice other things in service of somehow attaining a bit more firm ground in my own self. However, nevertheless, there are two moments that I think are potentially useful to mention. The first is that when I came back from India for the first time, and people started asking me to teach yoga, and I felt that it was not something that I was qualified to do, yet nevertheless, there were people that I started teaching a lot. And then the classic thing that happens when someone starts teaching too soon is that they lose the inspiration for the practice, and I got burned out. So there was a month, to maybe a month or two, where I stood on my mat and I just felt like I can't. But I stood on the mat, and I remember Pattabhi Joy saying, you can just take Surya Namaskar. And then he said, also, you can take Surya Namaskar in standing. So I did that instead of my full practice at that time. I just did Surya Namaskar in standing for like a month, 6 weeks. But then I was also like teaching way too much yoga. So I was running around here and there and driving around. If anybody lives in Miami, you know it's not fun to drive around Miami from multiple distances, from like Palmetto Bay to Key Biscayne to Miami Beach to Kendall back to Palmetto Bay. It's like you're just like covering distances that if you were on a horse and carriage would be like 5 months of your life, you know, every day. You know what I mean? And I got really burned out. So I kind of felt, But then suddenly it came back. Unfortunately for all of us, particularly those of us who've been practicing Ashtanga Yoga for a long time, one of the things that has always helped us is if we ever felt a lag in our practice, we'd go back to Mysore. And we knew our teachers would always be there. And I'm so sad that that's not there for us anymore. So there was a point where after Pattabhi Jois passed away, I felt like, I don't know, I felt like no matter how crazy the world was, he'd always be there. But of course, not that he's a human being. But then Chatterjee was there, and they're not there anymore. So where that place is, I don't know, we have to find it within ourselves now. And then I would also like to share that I sit Vipassana meditation, and my very first Vipassana, I'd been in India for 6 months, and you're not supposed to practice asanas. And because I'm this person that you're supposed to practice 6 days a week, so I'm like, absolutely, I practice 6 days a week. And I signed up to Vipassana, and they're like, the rule here is don't practice. And I just remember thinking, thank you. Now I have official permission. So now I will follow the rules, right? Because I was like, I have another rule to follow, right? And it's just, my personality. And then my friend, who was also practicing yoga, she was also there, and she assumed that I would just do some practice, like where no one could see. And then she said, I just watched you for 10 days, just not practice. And I thought, I was just following the rules. There's other rules. Now I'm going to practice. I practiced immediately when they said you were free. But then, and then what's interesting was to also practice that it's okay to let go sometimes, and that softness around it. As long as you feel the pull to keep coming back, I think there's no, what can we do with guilt and shame and blame except observe it, watch it, work with it, and not let it overwhelm us, and understand, especially if we've given to something else, it's really nice to come back.
So I was just thinking, sometimes people, they ask me, it's so hard for me to, now I go home, there's no teacher, or the teacher at home, it's perhaps not my preferred teacher or something like that. How can I keep it going? And I think the answer is best you can. Use the resources that you've got, even if they are imperfect. Get together with a friend and practice by yourself. If you only have half an hour, practice half an hour. If there's an Ashtanga teacher in town, maybe that Ashtanga teacher is teaching slightly different than you would prefer, but to go there and have a community, to have a time to do it, to get out of your house, that'll make you do it. Go and use that, whatever resources there is. We can't all live in Gokulam in Mysore. It's just not possible. Everything is a little bit less than that, right? So whatever resources you have, use them, even if they are imperfect. I think we probably have different experiences of that, right? So my first teacher was Lino Miele, certified teacher from Europe. There was 2 teachers in Europe pretty much at that time. There was John Scott and Lino Miele. I bumped into Lino. I practiced with him 5 years. He always spoke about Pattabhi Jois, about Guruji, and so I knew I had to see him. Over those 5 years, I think about a year in, I went to London and studied took a workshop for a week or something with Pattabhi Jois, and the whole family was there. Chatterjee was there. Shruti was there, Saraswati was there, they were all there. And then after 5 years total, I went to Mysore and I started to study with Pattabhi Jois there. And that felt very organic and a little bit like, this is the right place for me. This is it. Very profound, somewhat. And so much to say. I was very happy to be in Pattabhi Jois's presence. And then he passed. Over a year or two, he got worse and older and older, and then he passed. And then Sharaji, he had been in the shala along the way all the time, so I was very familiar with him, but I hadn't really seen him as main teacher, and he hadn't been. And suddenly he was number 1 in the shala instead of number 2, and I wasn't sure if that was right for me. Like, my guru had fallen away. So I didn't know what to do. And then I thought the only way I can know is to go and see how it feels like now. And there was so much, just like now when Sharaji has passed and Shruti is trying to uphold a practice place for us in Mysore. There's so much conversation about, is he worthy? Is it worth to go to Mysore? Does Sharaji know anything? You know, all that kind of stuff, right? And I took probably 5 years until I thought this is right for me. But during that time, as we were talking about before, just going to Mysore and having the possibility of throwing myself on the mat and practicing there in front of someone that was truly masterful in what he was doing was very useful for me. But I hadn't really chosen him. It took me 5 years to choose him as my teacher, of surrendering to that. Up until that, I was more like, yeah, I'm here in the shala and you are the boss. And there was a change there from being the boss to being my teacher in 5 years. And I'm not sure if there was a particular event. I think it was just like, there was one thing that's almost embarrassing to mention, which is like, and like I remember like sitting at the coconut stand and having a coconut one afternoon and thinking, why? And I was like a little bit like, oh, Sharat's like, yeah, it's like not so happy with Sharat that day. And then at someone just like realized, who am I? You know, what am I thinking? Why does my teacher need to be perfect? I am not perfect. You know, he doesn't, even if he was perfect, I probably wouldn't be able to recognize that. And I felt like I had been approaching perhaps a little arrogantly and not very humble in my wanting him to be perfect. It's like, and realizing that there's so much to this man. How can he be perfect? And you know, there's this saying that says, your guru preferably should live 3 valleys over, so you don't need to see his laundry and stuff like that. And I thought, oh, now I get it, you know, in that way.
So the experience that I had with Pattabhi Guruji was completely different than with Sharaji. So Pattabhi Jois was the first person that I saw in Mysore when I went for the first time. And when I saw him, I fell to the ground. And I just had this feeling of something came up within me. And I just felt a complete sense of surrender from the first moment that I saw him. And I didn't know that moment would change my life, but that moment changed my life. Sharaji, he was there in the shala. He was always there. So for me, he was just always there. And as Tim said, I think both of us, we very much looked at, Pattabhi Jois as Guruji. And from the moment I met him, he was that for me. Flawed individual though he was, with many faults that are, very, very present and very well known, nevertheless was the perfect teacher for me. And when he passed, there was this immense feeling of loss, as though he was itself the stable ground. So we talked before about Drudabhumihi. For me, I felt he was the stable ground, that he was the safe space, that he was the sense of home that I mentioned before. Like, if everything was going crazy in the world, if nothing worked, if everything fell apart, well, I knew that if he was in Mysore and he was there, he was always teaching. He never had seasons. He was just always teaching. If he was in Mysore, he was open. except for one yearly puja, right? But if he was there, no matter hot, no matter how hot it was, always teaching. And that felt very safe for me. And it felt like that was the firm ground. And that was somehow this home base. And then when he passed, there was just this feeling of, well, what now? What now? And Chatterjee, he was always there. I felt that he was there with so much love and so much devotion for his grandfather, and that he was always there. And I had received the certification from Pattabhi Jois Guruji many years before his passing. So it was like, okay, I'm still practicing. It was never about this piece of paper for me. I'm still practicing. Chatterjee was there. Always him or his grandfather would be helping me every day. Saraswati was also there, somehow in a more friendly capacity. And she has a wonderful, wonderful kind of like friendly presence in the shala. And so she was always there as well, but it was always him or his grandfather. So then it felt like, well, I want to keep practicing. Who else can be my teacher? And only he can be my teacher. So for me, I never tried to make Chatterjee Guruji. He was always the same person that he was when his grandfather was there. So I never needed him to change. He was there. There were two people helping me. Now there's only one. That's how I felt. And then for me, what it turned into was I never made him Guruji. That it never happened for me. To the extent that I got so confused sometimes after COVID, when we went back to Mysore after COVID, we would talk to people and they would, I had someone come up to me and say to me, oh, this morning Guruji is telling me. And I was like, oh, immediately I'm thinking, Pattabhi Jois. And I'm like, oh, what, you had like a seance or something? And, there was like a medium that you spoke to. And I'm like, how did Pattabhi Jois speak with you? And they were like, oh, you're an old student. Oh, I meant him. I'm like, oh, Chatterjee. Oh, yes, you spoke with Chatterjee this morning. Oh, okay. But every time Guruji is telling, I would be like, okay. And people started saying to me, Sharat Guruji. And I was like, thank you for saying that to me. Because I could not register. And it's still, people say Guruji in Ashtanga Yoga. I'm like, oh, Pattabhi Jois. And they're like, no. I'm like, oh, sorry. It still takes me, I have to evaluate how old this person is, whether they've got, and then I try to make it, but it's like an intellectual thing. So in that sense, I never needed him to be that. And then at some moment, though, I realized that like and I think even more in his passing, I realized that there was more than like teacher and student. I realized in his passing that, especially in the missing of him, that he was also my friend. And I feel that that's something that I didn't even realize until he was gone. And I'm not sure when that happened exactly, because it definitely wasn't there when his grandfather was alive. When his grandfather was alive, he was just 100% devoted to serving his grandfather, serving the lineage, and trying to protect the lineage and protect his grandfather from almost himself, because what would happen is that every student that came in before there was this system that wrote a letter to Pattabhi Jois, he would just look at them and say, oh, new student, you wrote the letter? And they would say, yes, Guruji, I wrote the letter. Tomorrow you take practice. Yes, you come. 8 a.m. start time. And then Chatterjee would be in the background going, Appa, no, full. Shala is full. And then he would say, letter writing. Again, tomorrow coming. No problem, you take it. Chatterjee would not like that person. And that person would be on the bottom of the list, yelled at every day. Everything was wrong with them. So he was like that, like almost like policing who was getting in. And so if you walked in and you met Chatterjee and at that time Sharat, and the shala was full, then the shala was full. But if you met his grandfather, he wrote the letter. Wonderful, you got in. So so these new students would like hang out by the door to see when they were going to go in and try to take registration, because there wasn't this whole like get an email and get a receipt and this sort of thing. But I think there was a moment when, after his grandfather had passed, and I went back to the Gokulam Shala. And there was just like a whole new system that was there. I think it was one of the first times that maybe Usha had come on as a secretary and had been like organizing things. And then suddenly he was like, Kino, hi! And I was like, me? right? I just remember thinking like, oh, wow, you're smiling and happy to see me. That's so weird. Is everything okay? I just felt like, is there a problem? Is the world going to end? No, I was like, let me just embrace this. You know what I mean? And I feel like there was some I don't know, some shift. And I think it comes from just coming back over and over again, coming back over and over again. And then, and strategy, he started to say in that time in Virginia, right before he passed, he looked around at all of the students. He said, oh, all the old students, some that had been with his grandfather. And I feel he looked at us with this kind of, like this warmth of, wow, we've shared this journey together, A
sense of trust.
Yeah, a sense of trust. Yeah. So I feel like that moment when suddenly, like, he looked at me with different eyes, I felt some changed. And I remembered that because up until then, he had been very much devoted to taking care of the sort of bounds of his grandfather. And I had been focused on his grandfather also, hanging off of every word that was said in every conference, every casual interaction, every moment when you would see his grandfather trying to eat chocolate. And so there was this whole thing where he got like type 2 diabetes and, but he liked sweets and chocolate in particular. And people would bring him chocolate from all over the world, 400 students. Each who heard that this man likes chocolate, wanting to win the favor of the teacher, So there were many times that he would be in his office trying to eat chocolate before his daughter came, Appa, no, diabetes. He would be like, like literally shoving them in his mouth, right? Because, what are you gonna live for, right? So I mean, but even every moment like that, we were just hanging off of that, and then suddenly he was gone. So for me, it was very important that I never needed him to replace that particular seat in my heart. I always needed him to just be himself, and from that there was so much love. I just loved him so much, just for who he was and who he and how much he gave to the practice, and how much how devoted he was to the practice, and his grandfather and the lineage, and how he cared ultimately about all of us, all of his students. And that was somehow very, very beautiful to see. Tim, you said that when we went into that new space, the new SYC, Hebal, thank you, and you shared, and maybe you can share more about it, that you saw him kind of putzing around in a way that he never did in the Gokulam Shala and Lakshmipuram Shala, which is Pattabhi Joyce's old house. So they both had, like in that Shala, they both had the most humble stools you could ever possibly imagine. I mean, like things that were falling apart and wedged into a corner. And here's, Pattabhi Joyce Guruji sitting on this stool that's kind of broken and leaning his shoulder on the wall. And Sharaji sitting on, these plastic stools that you would see in Gokulam around, or in Mysore, like plastic, like no backless stools. And then he's sitting on this, and then that's kind of what they were, what they were there. And then, but Pattabhi Joyce would come in and move a picture around or something like that, and strategy not so. But in the Hebal space, in the bigger space, Tim, you noticed that he would come in and kind of putz around in a way that you would do in your space, and that was really nice to see. You want?
Yeah, I was just, Ethan, you're going through a similar thing right now. Pattabhi Joyce, Shalaji passed. How was that for you? I feel we got some of that going here this week. Like, I feel really happy, coming into this room, and with all of you guys and see the practice. And today you were so crisp, man. You were so crisp, all of you. It was like, whew. It was beautiful to see you practice like this whole thing that is, if not decades old, then centuries old or thousands of years old, perhaps, we don't know. And you were just the direct lineage of that, without a doubt. Every single one. It was so beautiful. Thank you for that. That is very touching for me, and I'm sure for you also, to come in and see it happening here. And Sharaji passed, and Pattabhi Joyce passed, Krishnamacharya passed, and it's still going on. So, very nice.
We should also like to say that, coming back into this space, particularly after Sharaji's passing, was really emotional for us. There were many times that we would look over and see him where he had stood, standing here, standing there. There are some really great pictures that Edgar took that are really capture how much joy and love was in his heart that last period of time. And it was a lot to come back into this space. And then there was so much gratitude that he had been here teaching in that classical Mysore style method, and that he'd been standing in every little corner of this space and hanging out in Tim's office and eating mangoes sometimes. So it was a lot, and then a lot of gratitude, because we feel he left his energy here. And whatever we can do to honor that, continue that, nurture it, whatever seeds he left, we hope to nurture that. And we hope that all of you help nurturing that by coming to practice, by continuing your practice, and by honoring the lineage as much as possible, which just means getting on the mat, doing what you can, with understanding of where it comes from and what great benefit it could take in your practice. I just remember thinking when Pattabhi Joyce Guruji passed away that there's nothing more we can do to honor his life than to get on the mat and do the practice. There were some friends of ours that shared, "Oh, I feel so unmotivated to practice now that my teacher is gone." And I thought, how is that honoring your teacher? They're on the other side going, "Practice, practice." There's one thing he's going to say, both of them from the other side, it's do your practice. It's definitely not, "Oh, now that I'm not here, just go to the spa." No, from the other side, if there's any message, I'm like, if you go in a seance or something, or you go through like a medium, and then they're like, "Oh, this, Indian man is coming through with a lot of energy, and he has a message for you," I'm sure the message will be, unroll this rectangular sticky thing, and that with the yoga mat, and then do your practice. I feel like that, then I would be like, oh, then that's him coming through, So in that way, that's just what we hope in loving memory, in honor of the lineage, in honor of all the service that our teachers gave. We hope to hold this space, and that you also get a little piece of whatever grace and good fortune, whatever grace and blessing has passed through them to us, and to all of you who have met him. We hope that those seeds get nourished in each of you.